Hey Ingram, how you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for talking to Bayloric TV.
It's my pleasure to be on here.
Great. I mean, first of all, let's introduce yourself. Tell us about you.
All right. Well, my name's Jenna J. I host On the Ropes Boxing Radio. I've been doing it now for over 4+ years, and during that time, I've had the pleasure to interview just about every big name in the sport of boxing.
Great stuff. So, question first is, what got you into boxing?
I guess it's the fact that I'm the only girl in my family in the house that liked, to watch sports. I have 3 brothers, and just so happens that I had to watch what they watched, and they liked boxing, and there was a lot of pay-per-view fights. We had the illegal black box so we could get all the pay-per-views. And eventually, it turned out that I ended up liking the sport more than any of them have.
Okay, so was there any fight in particular when you was starting to watch boxing that was the fight that got my attention? Yeah, that's the one. Do you remember?
Yeah, I can tell you the exact fight that it was.
Okay.
Mike Tyson, he was getting out of jail for the 2nd time. He had been put in jail for a traffic incident, and he was fighting Francois Botha.
I remember that fight.
And I heard, my brothers and everyone talk about Tyson, the baddest man on the planet, the guy who bit off Evander Holyfield's ear. So I was curious. I watched him, and I was watching the fight, and, Tyson didn't look like the baddest man on the planet. He was getting, the crap beat out of him. He was getting outboxed. He didn't look good. And, the announcers were saying he looked like a shot fighter. Well, 5 seconds later, he throws one punch, and Francois Botha's knocked out. And I was like, whoa.
I remember that punch, because I remember Tyson hit him with a right hand straight down the pipe, bang, and Botha was out. And then Tyson picked him up afterwards. I remember that fight so well.
Yeah, no, that was the fight that really turned me on to boxing. And, ever since I've been hooked.
Do you have any particular fighters that you have any favoritism for? Or can you not mention that because you've got a radio show now?
No, I can mention my favorites. Well, one, I got to mention Mike Tyson because, what he did in his career, it went beyond just what he did in the ring. He was this person that was so crazy, so wild that you never knew what to expect. He drew me in, and I was watching every bit of it. I loved the press conference. I loved the things he'd say when he said, "Lennox, I want to eat your children," all that kind of crazy stuff. It really got me into the sport. And, there are other fighters that, I really like to watch. I liked watching Diego Corrales. I like watching Shane Mosley. I even sometimes like watching Vitali Klitschko. It just, it all depends on the type of fighter and the type of fight that they have. But I just love boxing.
So where are you based in America?
I'm based out of Boston, Massachusetts.
Boston, Massachusetts. Now, you had a fighter, a very famous fighter. They used to fight out of Massachusetts, I'm sure.
Well, we've had quite a few of them, but we had Marvin Hagler, we had
Marvin Hagler.
We had Micky Ward. We have a lot of people who came out of Massachusetts.
Wow. So, have you ever got to speak to Marvin Hagler?
Yes, I have 2 times on my show, and he's a great speaker. He was a great fighter, and it's one of the great pleasures I've had doing boxing radio.
Absolutely, the former undisputed middleweight champion of the world. So, how did you get into the radio business? I'd really love to know your story about that.
Well, I actually just kind of fell into it, to be honest. I was listening to a radio show hosted by Stacey Goodson, and he was actually refusing to do a radio show. He kept going on. He's like, all right, well, I'm going to keep playing music until somebody calls in to talk on the radio. And I was bored. It was a Wednesday night. I was like, wow, I guess I have to call in. So I called in and I talked with the host for over an hour. And, after the show, one of the listeners suggested to me, it's like, Jenna, I think a lot of people would be interested in hearing a female's perspective on boxing. One as knowledgeable as yourself. And that's kind of how I got into On the Ropes.
Oh, wow. So was it your show originally, or how was On the Ropes created?
It was my show originally. There was a guy named Mark Messer who suggested I start the show, and it was basically to have me as the star. And it actually started, under his name of Beat the 20. That was supposed to be the name of the show. And after one episode, I was like, no, that's not going to work. So I put some time into it, and I thought up of a name that, I liked and that would really, characterize the show as I wanted it to be. And I came up with the boxing terminology, on the ropes. It means basically a fighter on the verge of being knocked out. And, that's how I went with it.
Now, there was a movie called On the Ropes, or was it On the Ropes with Jackie Callan, or there was Jackie Callan, who was Meg Ryan, acted as Jackie Callan. Was it On the Ropes or Against the Ropes?
It was Against the Ropes.
Yes. Yeah. Did you ever get to see that movie?
I did get to see that movie. It was decent.
Decent. Now, a lot of people seem to rate that movie very highly.
Yeah, well, maybe higher. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't the greatest thing. She overdid the accent a little bit, and it was a decent movie. Put it that way.
So, you start the radio show. What did it take for you to be able to interview all the fighters in the world? What did you have to do? First, you were a female, so was that a challenge or was that an advantage?
I mean, it was a challenge all the way around. When I started the radio show, I was pretty much just like, take it week by week, see what happens. And the first guest of On the Ropes happened to be Peter McNeeley. Okay. So the first challenge is that the fact was Peter McNeeley was hitting on me during my first radio interview.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, well, I wonder if this is going to how all the interviews are going to be, are all the boxers going to hit on me? So I really didn't know what to expect going forward. And it was definitely a process. I mean, the show really didn't take off until the 30th episode. I mean, I struggled for the first 6 months to find a listenership, find people to listen. And it was an interview with Floyd Mayweather Sr. that really got the show to be noticed. And ever since then, we've been a full, guest show and had everyone that could be in boxing on.
Now, this is my third collaboration show, or crossover show, as I call it. The first show was with Leave It in the Ring. The second show has been with ATG Radio. And now, I'm On the Ropes Boxing. So do you know of the other two that I've spoken to so far?
I've heard of Leave It in the Ring. I actually haven't heard the episodes. ATG Radio, I've definitely heard that. Frank Stay is a good friend in boxing. He's doing a great show. I mean, I really admire him for what he does because he puts out so many radio shows during the week. Like myself, originally I was putting out a show each and every single week. But after 3 years, it becomes, harder and harder because you've interviewed everyone in the sport. You tend to repeat yourself. So you have to space it out less to have an original product. And Frank, it's amazing that he can put an original show together and has an original ideas each and every single week, 2 times, sometimes 3 times a week. So I definitely compliment him on what he's doing.
Yeah, Frank Stayer is doing a fantastic job there. ATG Radio, of course, with Tim as well. They're both doing an excellent job. And all the rest of the crew are there. And ATG Radio are definitely the leading boxing radio station out there at the moment.
Yeah, I'd say so. I would say that they're the best live boxing radio show out there. Absolutely. And I would consider myself to be the best pre-recorded show because they're two different things. A live show, anything could happen. You have mistakes. You have that live rough feel. And with my show, it's just more of a production at this point. All the interviews are pre-recorded and the show itself is edited so it can be the cleanest product I can put out there.
That's fantastic when you can pre-edit, eh?
Yeah.
So, in terms of now where you're at, How were you able to assemble and be able to talk to all the fighters in the world? What did you have to do?
Well, basically, just not take no for an answer. I mean, that's simplest explanation of it. I mean, just because they're a huge star, just because they've done all these, you know, big, radio stations and all that. Well, just because I'm internet radio doesn't mean I can't try. So I would just continuously try every single avenue to get these guests. And I remember the first name that really surprised me. That was Wladimir Klitschko. I got him on the 36th episode of On the Ropes. And it was simple. I mean, it was just simply emailing the fan site of the Klitschkos, and they got back to us. And they're like, well, do you want Wladimir to appear in studio or by phone? I was like, I don't have a studio, so by phone will work. And, ever since then, it just seems like any guest that I really put the effort forward to trying to get on the show, I've been managed to get. I mean, Manny Pacquiao, it took a long time to get Manny Pacquiao on the ropes. It took over a year of trying the same guy, but being determined and keep going for it, I eventually got him.
Wow. So how do you deal with publicists that just want to blow you off? You just keep going?
Yeah, I mean, that's generally what you have to do. You have to keep going after them and keep bothering them to the point where they're like, I don't want to hear from you anymore. Here's the guest. Because that's what's happened on a few occasions. It's like if you keep bombarding them over and over and over again saying, we want to do a certain guest interview of your client. And if you just keep going at them, eventually either they relent or they block you. Either or, But I just generally don't take no for an answer, and I keep going at it until I get what I want.
Okay, so in terms of the guests you've had on the show, 2 questions. First of all, have you had any guests that have raise your expectation level? I mean, in terms of when you've interviewed him, you thought before you interview him, this won't be a great interview, and then after you've done it, you said, wow, he's impressed you. And,
the guy that surprised me the most was actually Timothy Bradley.
Okay.
I had heard him in post-fight interviews, and he was so short. He was just giving these 2-word answers, and I was like, wow, when I get him on, he's going to be terrible. He's not going to give me a good interview. And ever since then, every time I have him on, he gives full, long, detailed answers, and he was a lot better than I thought he'd be. Another guy that really surprised me was Andre Ward. Okay. And the first time I had him on, I never expected him to be so intelligent, so in-depth, so well-spoken, and, he was certainly one that surprised me too.
Okay, and then quite the other way, this might make you a bit unpopular, but how about the other way?
Yeah, I'll tell you one guy. There was a guy I was so excited to get an interview with. I really wanted to talk to him. It was Kevin Kingpin Johnson. I'd heard interviews. I thought, wow, this guy's going to be a great interview, And for whatever reason, maybe he hates females or he wasn't open. He would give every one of my co-hosts, a good answer. And whenever I talked to him, I'd give him a really good question, and he'd give me a 2-word answer. And I remember one of the questions was, so how are you going to beat, what kind of game plan are you going to implement against Vitali Klitschko? How are you going to, take that title belt away? And his simple answer was, not get hit. That was it. That was his only answer. And when he fought that fight, that's all he did, was try to not get hit. He didn't try to win the fight or anything. So, maybe he just did what he said, but during that interview, he was a big disappointment.
Well, at least he was honest.
Yeah, at least he was. I'll give him that.
Okay, so when you've got these interviews and you're sitting there and you're talking to these fighters, what goes through your mind?
Well, generally, is my first thought is always time. Try to keep the fighter on as long as I think I can. That will, provide a good interview. Because whenever you talk to these publicists, they always ask you the same question: how long are you gonna have our fighter on there? And they want it to be as short as possible. And my job, when I get these guys on here, is to get the most out of them that I possibly can.
Absolutely.
I'm settle for a 5 to 10 minute interview. I want something in depth. I want something where the fans can really say they got something out of the interview. So, that's what really generally goes through my head and also too the fact that, I don't prepare any of the questions that I have for any guest. I don't think I've prepared since the 40th episode. I go right off the top of my head, anything I can think of. So generally, when I'm talking to these fighters, I'm trying to think of the next question. So sometimes when you have a guest that gives you a really short answer, it throws me off. I kind of like have a really long delivery into the question because I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to ask next. But, you know, that's just the way I go about it to give it kind of a natural feel.
As a woman, what have you encountered that you could say, you know what, it's because I am a woman, this is why I'm encountering these problems. Have you ever had to go through that process since being on the radio show? Apart from being chatted up, of course.
Yeah, the one thing that I usually got is that anyone that listened to the radio show, or actually people that didn't listen to the radio show, they just assumed the fact because I was a woman that I didn't know boxing, or I wouldn't know how to interview people, or I wouldn't know how to do any of the things that I know how to do, or have the knowledge that I have, you know, wouldn't be able to predict fights well or anything. It's just that preconception, that preconceived notion of what a woman should be or a woman boxing fan should be. So I think that's like the biggest thing that, you know, I had to deal with in terms of my sex and my, you know, and having to present the radio show is to get the respect of people. And the people that have listened to it, you know, they respect what I do and they know that I have great knowledge about the sport.
Okay, which fighter would you say that you've had the best chemistry with?
Best fighter that I had the best, I would have to say Bernard Hopkins, maybe. I think Bernard Hopkins, he's been on the show 9 times, and every single time he gives, you know, I could give him the smallest question. He'll go off for like 10 minutes. He can go off to another direction. He takes you on a journey. So I think the best chemistry of anyone that I had is with Bernard Hopkins, just because I seem to get more out of him than anyone else.
Okay, and what's been your worst experience? Since, you know, you've been on the show, you think, you know what, why am I bothering to do this? What's been your worst experience?
There's been quite a few bad experiences. You deal with all sorts of people that are just unsavory.
Really?
You know,
Whoa.
Yeah.
Hold on. Unsavory characters on radio?
Yes, unsavory characters in radio or unsavory people.
Wait, wait. These are professional fighters we're talking here.
Oh, no. I mean, there have been a few fighters that, you know, I wouldn't say acted the most properly. I won't toss out any names, but there are a few that acted a little inappropriate during the interview or didn't conduct themselves in the best way. But I mean, other people, in terms of like, you know, boxing fans or even people that I worked with. I've had to work with some people that, you know, once you got to know them, it's like, wow, I really didn't know this person at all. You know, sometimes it takes talking to a person for a long time for them to reveal everything. And once you find out, it's pretty scary.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that.
Mm.
How have you responded to those situations?
You know, the one thing that I've always done with my radio show and everything is whenever someone tries to stop me, whenever someone says, no, you can't do it, or whenever somebody just, you know, generally wants me to fail, it motivates me more. I mean, the times that I've wanted to quit doing the radio show, the one thing it's always brought me back is people trying to get in my way. I mean, I've had people, all sorts of people, try to take the show down from its early conception. I've had rival radio shows telling certain guests not to appear. Like, I remember there was this show, I don't even know if it's around anymore. It was called OTG on I think the Grind, something like that.
Heard of them.
There was a guy named Patty Cronin, and you know, I had Floyd Mayweather Sr. on the week before. We had a really positive show. We were the #1 sports show on all of Blog Talk Radio, and we were supposed to have Steve Bunce on, Steve Bunce, for an interview. And Patty Cronin was friends with Steve Bunce, and because we had the success we did with that previous show, and because we topped their radio show, he asked Steve Bunce as a personal favor not to do the show. Even though we had him booked, even though we had him in promos for the show, told him not to do it. You know, and that's the kind of things that just really annoy me, is when people try to do that.
Well, I've noticed that funny enough, I've had a similar situation. I've done interviews with certain people, and I've had one person particularly go behind my back and turn and say, why are you doing an interview with Ingram Jones? Don't do an interview with him. Why are you doing an interview? But the gentleman is a very mature gentleman, a little older, and says I interview who I want to do interviews with. So I've been fortunate so far, but it has happened.
Yeah, I mean, you never know who you run into in this game. There's a lot of jealous people out there that see what you're doing, and they want to stop you. You know, they'd say, well, why the heck should that guy get an interview? I deserve him. You know, it's just people having their own jealousy. And one thing I definitely tried to do is I don't talk bad about anyone, other radio shows or anything like that. I don't try to get guests not to appear of other people just because I don't like them. I leave it up to the guests. They can choose who they want to do an interview with. It's their free right. You know, I don't get jealous or anything like that. I used to work with somebody who would get jealous when one of our guests would go on another show. You know, we had Emmanuel Stewart, and this is one of the things I'm most proud about of my show is Emmanuel Stewart appeared 26 times over a 3-year period.
Wow.
And, you know, it was one of the great pleasures. It was an honor to speak with him. But when Emmanuel would appear, he loved to talk boxing with anyone, any other radio show. He didn't care how big it was. He just liked to talk boxing. And the person I worked with, he'd get deeply offended whenever Emmanuel would talk to someone else. And I'm like, hey, dude, relax. You know, we're lucky that Emmanuel spends the time he does with us. It's good that he's out there. It's good that he's sharing boxing with more people. But some people just don't understand that.
No, but then, you know, for me, it's... I don't call it as competition. I think it's more that, you know, when there's other people out there doing great work, you yourself have to step up your game and keep yourself, you know, there all the time. Keep working hard all the time.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, when I've seen other shows get certain guests, and I'm like, all right, well, if that guy can get them, you know what? I'm going to keep pushing for it. I'm going to keep going at it. I'm not going to stop until I get that guest too. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it does actually help step up your game, if anything. But I don't get offended by any other show out there.
So, when you said about people trying to block you or trying to stop you, and people trying to take fighters away from you, have any fighters come back and said to you, hey, you know what, this has happened or that's happened?
No, I mean, none of the fighters or anyone has ever gossiped about it, but I know through other people when they've tried to do things. Like, I had a breakup with a person that I worked with for 3 years, and instead of him handling it like a mature adult, he decided to try to interfere with my show in any way possible. You know, he told lies to the website that I was on. He took our official On the Ropes Boxing Radio website and he took it over. He stole it, you know, and I had very good reasons for letting him go. I mean, if you do your research and Google search the name of the person that I used to work with, you'll find out some of the legit reasons why I had to let him go. There's a lot of things out there from other people that he upset. But, you know, it's one of the things that comes with this, I guess. You know, you have to deal with certain people like this and just try to move on and move forward.
Now, I was just about to make the point. When I first started listening to On the Ropes, I listened, and there was a gentleman in the background who used to talk, Jeff, who was with you as well.
Yeah, that was the person I used to work with.
And you guys sounded real good together.
Yeah, no, we actually had, you know, very good on-air chemistry. And for the first couple years, you know, we worked pretty well. But what people don't know is when we switched up from a live format to a pre-recorded format, you know, there was a lot of pauses in between takes, we'll put it that way. And in between those takes, you know, his true side showed in. When it was live, you know, when he knew other people were listening, he didn't show, you know, the true side of his nature. But when we became a pre-recorded show, I had to deal with basically the ugly side of working with him. And that's just one of the things that led to him no longer being on the show and him probably not even, I don't think he even writes anymore.
So how does that affect Jenna J now?
I mean, you know, the really good thing is honestly that this all happened. I used to be with Eastside Boxing for over 3 years.
Wow.
And I was very loyal to the website. I thought of them even before my own co-host, you know. And when I was having the problems that I did, I knew when I let him go off the show that there was a chance that they would side with him because they've known him for longer, and that he might talk behind my back and try to get me off the site. And that's exactly what he did, you know, and they sided with him for one reason. They believed because his name was on the articles, because he was on the show, that he was responsible for what the show became. And over the 3 months that I was away from Eastside Boxing over at Doghouse Boxing, they learned the truth. They saw his work and they saw my work continue just the way it always had been. And they actually came back to me. They came back to me and said, Jenna, we were wrong. We want you back on the website. And you know what? If we lose Jeff because of it, we're fine at that. And I was like, wow. I mean, you guys backstabbed me, and then you're willing to do the same to the guy that you backed. So you backed the wrong horse, and now you're coming back to me, and I'm supposed to just leave everything and come back to your website and trust you of all things, and it just wasn't going to happen. I came back for one reason and one reason alone. I came back for a week just to show my ex-co-host that they were willing to send him down the river just as easily. In terms of ratings, I mean, every person that's worked for Eastside Boxing has left. They have no long-term writers. They all leave at some point, and that's because they don't conduct themselves professionally.
I have to make a point about Eastside Boxing. When I first started getting the interviews and putting the interviews out there, I would notice in the forums that somebody would write nonsense and it would get 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 views. I put a good quality interview up and he gets about 10 views. And I got fed up with it, so I just left it. I left Eastside Boxing. I haven't gone back since. And I've gone to Doghouse, and Doghouse have been really excellent. All my interviews they've put on the website, and so supportive. Big difference, so professional.
Yeah, no, that's the main difference, and that's the greatest thing about the problems I had with my ex-co-host. I mean, not only did I learn new things, I actually edit the show, I do all the artwork, I get all the guests, I do everything practically by myself. I mean, I have a few people that help, edit the content and help check over my stuff, but I mean, I pretty much do it all by myself. When I worked with my ex-co-host, he did all the editing, he did all that stuff. And, it's the great thing is not only have I learned how to do all this stuff myself and do it better than it was ever done before, not only has the show improved, but now I'm with a site that truly is owned by an honest and good person who really, truly loves boxing and really, truly loves the work that I do. They really appreciate it.
Which is great.
Yeah, I mean, at ESB, I actually had a key to the front page. I just put up my own content whenever I wanted. They never said anything. Over 3 years, I barely got any compliments or anything about the work and everything I was doing. We got them to the top 15,000 websites in the world with the radio show. And right now, ever since I left, I mean, they've tanked. I mean, they're below 100,000 in terms of rankings, and they've just really fallen off. While Doghouse Boxing, I mean, they've thrived. They've jumped ahead of Max Boxing, and now they're definitely going up. They've gone up 100,000 in web rankings since I've been there, and it's because they conduct themselves right.
Wow. So that's a credit to Doghouse Boxing.
Huh?
It's a credit to Doghouse Boxing.
It is. It's definitely a credit to Doghouse Boxing and the people that run it, and the guy himself, Chi, who he keeps all this work up. I mean, he does webmaster work for Max Boxing too, so I think he's one of the hardest working people in boxing, and it's a pleasure to work with him.
Wow. So shout out to Chi as well.
Yeah.
So how did the whole thing with you going over to ATG Radio I know, because I've heard you a few times on the show, how does that work? Or how did it work?
It just basically works that, if Frank says, Jenna, can you appear in the show? I appear in the show. I mean, I don't mind, appearing on anyone's show out there. I mean, I've done it on other people's, can't think of the name, Real Combat Media. I've gone on that before too. I mean, whenever someone asks me, it'd be almost hypocritical not to appear on someone's show because, I mean, I get these fighters on here. They're taking time out of their day. And who am I not to take some time out of my day when a fellow show or somebody wants an interview? It's just something I feel like I should do.
In terms of fighters that you've had on the show, what about female boxers? How's your chemistry been with them?
I've had quite a few female boxers on the show. I mean, I've had Holly Holm. I think I had Larissa Rivas. I had Susie Ramadan. And generally the chemistry is pretty good. It's just, a matter of that female boxing, unfortunately, just isn't as popular or people don't know it as well. And I'll be fully honest, too. I know boxing extremely well, but women's boxing, I don't know it as well because it's just one of those things where if it's not on TV and it's not getting headlines and that, it's really hard to follow. And I think that's the biggest problem that they have with it. But, in terms of female boxers and female people that I've interviewed, I had Michelle Rosado on there. I've had, very good chemistry. It doesn't make a difference if I'm interviewing a male or female. It's all interviewed the same to me.
I mean, I remember the times of Mia St. John and Riker and Layla Ali. They were really good times for female boxing. Why do you think it suddenly just plummeted the way that it did?
I think you need a star. I mean, and you know, Layla Ali was a star. She was a name, and you know, it takes that kind of fighter to really escalate the sport. And I mean, if you look at MMA, you have Ronda Rousey. I mean, without Ronda Rousey, female MMA would be in the tank right now. I mean, there was Chris Cyborg before that, and you know, I think there was I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but you know, she was out there. It's just it takes a star, and unfortunately, it takes a really pretty face to get attention for that sport. And when you're in combat, it's not going to stay that pretty, unfortunately.
What about
You know,
Cecilia Breakers?
yeah, I've heard of Cecilia Brækhus, but you know, it's one of those things where I've only seen her fight maybe one or two times, and you know, it's just them not getting unfortunately out there, especially not on this side of the country. I mean, Brækhus is supposed to be fighting Holly Holm.
She's fighting Mia St. John.
Mia St. John. All right, yeah, she's fighting Mia St. John. You know, it's just that's the case right now. I mean, like Mia St. John, she got attention for women's boxing because she posed topless for Playboy. You know, unfortunately, it takes that kind of thing to get press for women's boxing, and it's one of those things I don't think will ever be truly accepted.
While we're on the subject of female boxing, I've got to ask the question: have you ever laced on a pair of gloves before? Boxing gloves, that is.
I I actually have. I mean, having three brothers, you know, you get into some tussles, you know, you have to deal with a lot of things. And the one time I laced up some gloves was actually when I had to pick up my brother from the gym. He was at a boxing gym and he was making me wait forever. And I was like, come on, Chris. I mean, why are you making me wait here like this? Why are you gonna do me like this? And he's like, well, come on, I got to finish up there. And he actually kept arguing to me. I'm like, Chris, you know how much I'd love to punch you with one of those gloves? He said, you know what? Get in the ring here and punch me. And he's like, I'm like, all right. So I threw on the gloves. I got in the ring, and he just let me have at him. And you know, it was kind of funny. It was kind of fun. He was blocking some of the shots, and it was all fun until he actually decided to throw a shot, and he meant to miss me, and I jumped up at the wrong time, and he clipped me right on the chin, and it's like, wow. You get that feeling. It goes all the way from the back of your spine, all the way up into the back of your head. And he knocked me down. He knocked me down, but I got right back up, and I proceeded to give him a low blow, Goliath style, for knocking me down.
So it was a flash knockdown then.
Yeah, it was a flash knockdown, and then I got.
So Jenna J takes a good shot then.
Yeah, I take a good shot in the chin.
So you never decided to go on and become a female boxer then?
No. I mean, you know, I'm the girl next door looking right now, but you know, I have certain features that I don't think would be good for boxing. Chin, nose, they can only take a few shots. They work for me now, but you know, a couple more shots, I don't think I'll be rocking them too well after.
So, in terms of yourself and what you've achieved, you've accomplished a hell of a lot and a hell of a lot of shows. The benefits, we talk about the negative and the, you know, the bad press you can get when you're not favoured by certain people. What about when it's going good? What are the benefits? Of course, you get to interview the fighters, but what else? Does Jenna J get to go to live fights? Does she get any, you know,
perks?
Yeah, perks.
Yeah. I mean, you know, at one point I had a really, really good sponsor that actually came from the UK, and it was a good perk. You know, I was getting like $560 a month for just having their name on my banners, and that was a pretty good perk. But I mean, in terms of doing these shows, the thing I get the most pleasure out of is when a line blows up, when an interview blows up, and everyone's talking about it. I mean, it's happened quite a few times this show. I think the one that probably got the most attention is when Floyd Mayweather Sr. went on a rant about Manny Pacquiao. I mean, he called him everything. He's like, Manny Pacquiao ain't nothing but a little midget faggot. I was like, whoa! And that line blew up everywhere. It got so big that they actually asked Manny Pacquiao on the red carpet about the things that Floyd Sr. had said about him on my show. And it was, I think that's, you know, one of the biggest pleasures I get is when that stuff blows up, when everyone's talking about it. You know, I did a video for it, got 20,000 hits, but there was about 17 other videos that had copied the material, and it was over 200,000 hits in terms of the people that actually listened to what he said.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So that must be there must be one of those moments you went, ah, that feels good.
Yeah, no.
Take that, you haters.
Yeah, especially the haters. Yeah. Anytime I do something really good at the show, it's kind of like a slap in the face to anyone that's just, try to bring me down, try to put me down, try to be negative about my show. It's like, okay, well, here's what I can do, and that's why I kind of look at it.
So, Jenny, you come across to me as a very ambitious lady.
Yeah.
What are the plans for On the Ropes, like, down the line? 2-3 years, where would you like the show to be?
Well, I mean, I'd like to see it expand from just being an internet boxing radio show. I mean, internet boxing radio, it gets a bad rap from some people. I don't know why. I mean, the show is available worldwide by link. Anyone in the world can click it. If you're on a local radio show, only people locally can listen to it, unless you put a podcast online or anything like that. Some of my shows have had well over 50,000 listens, and, it's just that kind of thing where I'm getting directly out to the boxing fans. It's one of those things that I'd like to see continue to grow. My show's changed a lot. I mean, it used to be, when I started, it was one of the only few radio shows out there. Now there's tons of boxing radio shows out there, but I think my show keeps changing, and that's what's going to keep it alive and well in the future. I mean, now it's a single host format. I've changed it up. I have a nice segment called Ask Jenna where the fans can get involved. They can ask me questions. And it's truly made it a much better show, and it's made it more original. I mean, there's a lot of shows out there that have multiple hosts and all that, but I'm the only person on there now. It's just me interviewing all these people, just me talking about the sport, and just me answering the fan questions. And it's, helped, I'd say, reinvigorate the show. And I think that in a few years, it can grow into something a lot bigger.
I think that's real key, because certainly with myself, I've done a Ask Ingram bit on Twitter. So sometimes I'll be on Twitter and it'll be quite buzzing. You'll have 6 or 7 people, maybe 10 people talking at a time about a subject. I'll say, all right, hey, ask you questions, and I'll do a video afterwards answering those questions. So you don't get, I get about 100, maybe 150 people, 150 views. But fans seem to like that. Fans seem to like you engaging with them, and I think that's great. I think it's more fan interaction, the better.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, the Ask Jenna segment takes a long time to put together. The fact that the show is pre-recorded, there's a lot of effort that goes into it. You have to gather all the questions. You have to organize the questions. You have to decide a certain amount because I generally know how long I'm going to speak on a certain subject. And then you got to edit it all out. And I mean, in a total, that Ask Jenna segment might be only 14 minutes long, but it takes over 2 hours to produce it. But the fans seem to enjoy it, so it makes it worth the effort putting into it.
There's something I must say, Jenna. The first time I heard your voice, I thought, who's this lady? And then the second thing I thought to myself was, she's got a really great voice for boxing. She's got a real good radio voice. And I think you'd make an excellent commentator.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my goals. And you know what the funny thing is, Ingram? I actually, when I started this radio show, I actually was afraid to hear myself on the radio. I was afraid that if I sounded like a dork, or if I didn't, if I sounded kind of girly or sounded stupid on the radio, I couldn't do it anymore. So for the first 35 episodes, I actually never listened to myself.
Wow.
I didn't trust it. Yeah, and it actually took the Wladimir Klitschko interview to finally sit down and listen to it. I took a deep breath. I was like, all right, doesn't matter. I have Wladimir Klitschko. Doesn't matter if I sound like crap. Doesn't matter if anything. I have this big interview. I'm just going to listen to it. I bit my lip. I turned it on, and I was surprised. I didn't think I would sound as professional as I do, and I didn't think I would sound as well as I do on the radio, but, it turned out that way, and now I listen to it all the time.
Okay, let's talk about boxing, and let's talk about the current super fights that are out there. First of all, we've got Rigondeaux and Donaire. Your thoughts?
This fight is one of the ones I'm most looking forward to this year. I mean, it's an absolute fantastic fight, and it's two of the best people in the division. I know people are saying they want to see Donaire versus Mars, but Mars, he's truly a 118-pound fighter moving up. This is the best fight that can be made at 122 pounds. Rigondeaux, he's undefeated. He's 11-0, 8 KOs. He's got that amazing amateur background. Nonito Donaire, he hasn't lost in over 12 years. I mean, it's It's a super fight. It's an absolute amazing fight for boxing fans, and I can't wait to see it. I mean, it's one of those ones where you keep going back and forth. Who's going to win? I mean, Darnaire honestly has not faced anyone of the skill level of Guillermo Rigondeaux. I truly believe that. He's faced a lot of great fighters. He's fought a lot of great people, but Guillermo Rigondeaux, I think, is the most unique, skilled fighter, and I think it is the toughest test that Darnaire is ever going to face in his career. And it could go either way. I've gone back and forth in my mind saying, well, Rigondeaux could win. He could knock him out. He could get ahead on the cards. I think this will be a split decision. I think it'll be that close. I would not be surprised to see both fighters hit the canvas. But when it comes down to it, I think that Nonito Darnaire is the more versatile fighter, and I believe that he will just edge it out in the scorecards. But, I mean, like I said, it could go either way.
I'm going to go with Darnaire, experience. I mean, Rigondeaux's got great what he's done, but 11 fights, I don't know. Is that going to work for him, or is that going to work against him?
Honestly, I don't think it's going to work against him. I mean, yeah, he hasn't faced as many people out there, hasn't faced that many elite fighters out there, but still, he's very experienced. He faced a lot of great fighters throughout the amateurs, so you can't discount facing those great fighters all the way back then. He's now a seasoned fighter. He's a fighter that can go 12 rounds. He's experienced. I think right now they're meeting at the right point. I mean, you've seen too many fights, Ingram, that have not been made, that waited too long, that got stopped. We want to see Pacquiao versus Mayweather. Boom, got ended. We wanted to see Bradley versus Khan. That got stopped. We're tired of it. We can't see any of these big fights not happen.
We wanted to see it? I'm not so sure. I mean, Bradley's fine. Khan's great. Would it have been a great fight to watch? I don't know. I'd love to. I think Bradley would have got inside and caused Khan a lot of damage, because Khan can't fight on the inside. I don't think it would have kept him outside of the jab. I think it would have been a decent fight. But I still would prefer to see Garcia versus Khan.
Yeah, no, I mean, in terms of where it was at that point in time, that's a chance to see an undisputed champion of a weight class, every single belt on the line. And that's a very rare feat in boxing, and that's why it was very important for that fight to happen. And unfortunately, they could not come to terms. Each guy had pulled something, and boxing fans were robbed of seeing that elite one champion that we just don't often get to see.
And why do you think that fight wasn't made?
I mean, there's multiple reasons there. I mean, at the time, there was a time where Bradley didn't want the fight. He was having problems with Gary Shaw Promotions. He wanted out of his promotional agreement. That was one of the reasons. The fight was initially agreed to, and he didn't want the fight. And then it became a point where Amir Khan didn't want the fight. So it's both guys were at fault. A lot like Pacquiao versus Mayweather, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, at this point, if the fights don't happen, you're robbing boxing fans. That's why I appreciate what Darnaire and Rigondeaux are doing. No more BS. They're getting in the ring, and we're going to see a great fight.
That's going to be a fantastic fight, and I can't wait. Another big fight. Austin Trout, Canelo. Your thoughts?
Austin Trout versus Canelo. I think this is an amazing risk by Golden Boy Promotions. Because, it's not the first time that they've tried to do something like this. They were going to match up Canelo with Paul Williams. And I thought, wow, if he can beat Paul Williams, that makes him a real legitimate guy out there, a guy that could possibly be mentioned, in a fight with Mayweather. This is the same case here. You have an undefeated champion in Austin, no doubt, Trout. He's legitimately a belt holder. He, deserved his spot to get here. This is the toughest test for Canelo. If Canelo can beat Austin Trout, then people will talk about a Canelo versus Mayweather fight as a super fight. But also, too, I mean, if Trout wins, I know people really won't want to see it stylistically, but then he himself becomes a legit challenger for Mayweather, too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to go for Trout in this one. I think that we're going to find out why Canelo hadn't fought anybody in his own weight division, and why now Trout's the first guy fighting in his own weight division. We're going to discover why on that night.
I think it's going to be a very close fight. It could be even a controversial fight. I remember watching Austin Trout versus Cotto. And I was watching it early on thinking, if Austin Trout could just pick it up, I think, the moment actually got to him early, and he just was not throwing his punches. And as he went on, he did enough to beat Cotto. But to be honest, Cotto really didn't look the same. It looked like he left his best fight against Mayweather. And it really wasn't as much of what Austin Trout was doing. It was really more about what Miguel Cotto wasn't doing. I mean, there were opportunities to throw punches. There were a lot of opportunities he did not take. I think Canelo, he's definitely unproven at this point. He has not that elite guy. But, some fighters, they really rise to the occasion. And I think we might see that with Canelo. Sometimes he doesn't throw a lot of punches. Sometimes, he gets a little lackadaisical in there. But in this particular fight, I think he's going to be tested, and it's going to bring the best out of him. He wants that Mayweather fight. He desperately wants it. And he knows that this man is standing in front of him. This is the only person that can stop him from having it. And I think we'll see the best Canelo. It'll be a close fight, taking Canelo by a close majority decision.
Okay. When I spoke to Austin in the interview I did with him, I said to him, what did it feel like being in the ring with Miguel Cotto? He said, well, he felt like a welterweight. He did not feel like a light middleweight to me. And down the stretch, I could feel I was stronger than him. So, could it be the fact that Cotto was in with a natural light middleweight? Of course, again, when he fought Mayweather's a welterweight as well, moving up to light middle. So, could that have been significant in the fight?
I mean, it depends. I mean, Cotto also fought Yuri Foreman, who was a natural 154-pounder. He fought Ricardo Mayorga, even though he didn't deserve the shot at all. I mean, Ricardo Mayorga went in there like at 175 pounds. He was ridiculously big.
Absolutely.
By the time he got into the ring. So, I mean, I really don't think it was as much the size because, Cotto actually was winning some of the early rounds. It's just like he just stopped. He stopped working his jab. It just seemed like it wasn't in him. That fire wasn't in him anymore. It seemed like I said, he left everything with Mayweather. In this fight here, he was just going through the motions, and it wasn't enough.
Absolutely. I mean, my prediction was that Trout would win on points. And I said I looked back at the HBO footage when they were interviewing Cotto about the Trout fight, and he talked about his family and almost wanting to retire. He said, well, I'll have a couple more fights and we'll see how it goes. So it seemed to me after the Mayweather fight, he really would like to have retired and start talking more about his family.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one problem with certain fighters. When you are already talking about retirement, you have one foot out the door. I mean, mentally, you cannot put everything into there if you're thinking about your family already, if you're thinking about your life after boxing. I think the best fights and the best fighters, they have one thing on their mind, and that's beating the opponent in front of them. And Miguel Cotto, he honestly really didn't have that mentality anymore. I mean, you've seen it in other fights that he had. He fought Antonio Margarito, and when Antonio Margarito said, I'll die in the ring to beat you, and Miguel Cotto says, that's stupid. Why would you want to die? This is just my job. That's all it is. And, that's the truth of it. That's how you should think of it, as your job. You shouldn't want to die in the ring to get a win. But, you need that mentality, though. You need that mentality and belief in yourself, like, I will do anything to get this victory. And if you don't believe that, then it's not going to show.
Maybe Cotto's become a family man and that fire's gone.
Yeah, I mean, that happens to certain fighters. They think about their life after boxing and they forget about the life that they have in boxing.
Well, Cotto's done a hell of a lot. He's done great stuff in boxing, and maybe he needs to consider retirement. Sadly.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the options out there that there is for him. But, I mean, there are also guys that he can beat. I mean, if he wants to go promotionally, again, outside of Top Rank, he could fight an Ishii Smith, and he can beat an Ishii Smith. Ishii Smith is definitely one of the weaker champions out there, and a guy that Miguel Cotto would be favored against.
Sounds an interesting fight. Maybe you should try and make it happen.
Hey, I tried to make fights before, and they just don't happen. I had a few shows where I was like, you know what? I just want to see if I can make a fight. I'll interview certain fighters and certain trainers and just get them talking about it, and maybe it can happen. So I interviewed Floyd Mayweather Sr., and I was like, Floyd, what do you think about that sparring tape that Paul Spadafore had of your son? People say that he got the best of your son. And I'm like, would you like to see that fight? So he starts talking about it. And then the very next week, I get Paul Spadafore on. I tell him what Mayweather Sr. says. He starts talking about it. The next follow-up week, I get Roger Mayweather. They're like, we can make that fight. We can make it happen. And I got people talking about it for like a week, and then it didn't happen.
Wow. Well, I did hear Paul Spadafora on ATG Radio, and he did say that, in sparring that's great, and I did what I did in sparring, but Floyd wasn't in shape, blah 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 blah, and he sort of backed down from it all now, and although people like to bring reference to it all the time.
Yeah.
So another fight I'd like to talk to you about upcoming is David Price's rematch with Tony Thompson.
Yeah, I think this is actually the smartest move that David Price could have done for his boxing career. I mean, if he had sat back and fought 5 other people and got wins, it would not be as impressive as getting the win over the guy that just beat him. There's only one way to overcome, a shocking loss. That is to immediately jump back on that horse, take him in the ring again, and avenge it. I watched that fight. I was surprised. Tony Thompson was not in the best of shape. He was 262 pounds. He had love handles. He did not look like he was physically nor mentally prepared for the battle in front of him. And in a clinch, what looked to be a light shot on the side of the head, it completely discombobulated David Price. He got down on the ground. He tried getting up. He was on shaky legs. It was shocking to me. I honestly wondered what would happen when he got hit with a shot. I didn't think that was going to happen, not that type of shot. So I think the rematch is definitely good for him. How it's going to go, I think he has to strike first. He has to go for the kill first. He has to get Tony Thompson out of there, because the longer it goes, the longer he stays in there, he can show more of his vulnerabilities. That's what he showed in the fight with Tony Thompson. He honestly doesn't have the greatest chin in the world. It's not one of those type of shots that anyone's going to get knocked out from. It was that type of shot that only he got knocked out from. So I think it's, it shows that his career may not go in the direction that we all want to see, but I think he is capable of winning this rematch.
Interesting. The Haymaker is back.
Yes, he is.
What do you think?
Oh, I think it's good. I think it's good that he's back. I was honestly impressed with what he did with Dereck Chisora. Yeah. I honestly didn't believe that he would perform the way that he did in that fight. I actually said something after the whole brawl that they had. I said, you know what, David Haye, he's only showing liquid courage. Let's see him actually get in the ring of Dereck Chisora. And he actually blocked me on Twitter for saying that comment, because I said it to him. And, I was surprised. I was surprised that he took the fight, but I'm glad that he did, because it was a big economical fight for him. And it was a fight that people wanted to see. It had interest, and I was surprised with the way that he performed. So it's good to see him back, but at the same time, I wonder what his reasons are for coming back. If you're not getting a fight with Vitali Klitschko, you haven't shown, the heart of a champion or a warrior spirit, because you seem to only want just the big fights or retire. That's it. If you can't get a Klitschko, it seems like he wants to retire. So he's announcing his comeback. He's announced that he's getting back in the ring. The type of opponent that he's going to be, I don't know. He can take on a Povetkin, but if he wins that belt, what does it mean? It's a worthless belt, in my opinion. He doesn't make him a champion. It only makes him, I don't know, what we can say, a paper champion, if anything.
My suspicion is he's going to take on Manuel Charr.
Really?
I could see him fighting Manuel Charr. Manuel Charr's unbeaten. He's in the top 10. He's a poor man's version of John Ruiz, okay?
Manuel Charr, isn't he the same fighter that fought Vitali Klitschko and lost TKO?
Yes, but he got stopped, and Charr's argument is he got stopped on cuts. David Haye is a very good salesman, and I suspect David would say, well, I stopped Dereck Chisora, Vitali couldn't do that, now I'm going to go out and knock out Manuel Charr, and Vitali couldn't do that, let's get the fight on.
Yeah, he could be going that route there. But, Manuel Charr, you can say that he was stopped on cuts all he wants, but he wasn't ahead in the fight. Vitali Klitschko, there's always this thing, TKO 6 against Lennox Lewis, but he was ahead on the cards. He was winning the fight at the time of the stoppage. Even though it looked like Lennox Lewis was coming on, he was ahead. Manuel Charr, he wasn't ahead against Vitali Klitschko. He was in there, he was being competitive, but I don't think that fight will do a lot for David Haye, and I don't think it would really help lure Vitali Klitschko into a fight. I think the only thing that really could lure him into a fight is if he fights Alexander Povetkin. If he fights Alexander Povetkin, he gets that paper title. Neither brother's been able to get Povetkin in the ring. Povetkin's no longer a factor. They have to fight David Haye. That's the way that they'll look at it.
But the other fight they're talking about is Pulev. Haye Pulev. I don't know about that fight happening. I think Pulev is he's got an excellent left jab, and I think to beat David Haye you need a good left jab. You know.
Who brought Pulev? You know, I've been actually very impressed with what he's done in the ring. I mean, you know, he does have an excellent jab. He actually has decent punching power. He's not the biggest guy out there, but you know, he uses his weight properly in the ring. And you know, I think he would actually beat David Haye. So if David Haye wanted to take on someone that isn't that well known and get a loss, then that would be the direction he should go.
I don't know. Manuel Charr's been saying a lot on Twitter. He's been calling out David Haye, He's been this and that, you know. So we'll see what happens. But don't be surprised if you hear the names Manuel Charr, David Haye in the next week or so.
I will take that one to heart.
Dereck Chisora, Del Boy's back.
Yep, Del Boy is certainly back. You know, he's a good character. He's a guy that can certainly draw people in. You know, I think I've interviewed him quite a few times. He gives a varying interview. He's sometimes very boisterous and sometimes he's very quiet. I think it's good. I think it's a good guy to have out in the sport. But, I mean, he's a guy that's kind of, honestly, he's the British version of Ricardo Mayorga, in my opinion. He's a guy that can capable of getting some good wins. He can talk a lot, but in big fights, he's more likely than not to cave.
Right, that's the thing. I mean, I know Don Charles very well. Personally, I know Dereck very well. Being at the gym, I saw him prepare for the David Haye fight. Been to dinner with Dereck, really nice guy, like I said. But the question about Dereck Chisora is, how good is he? How good is Dereck Chisora? You know, the Helenius fight. Helenius has never been the same fighter since that Dereck Chisora fight. You know,
I think Dereck Chisora is a very good fight on the domestic level, but on the world level, I don't think he's, you know, that great of a fighter. I think he's a good heavyweight, but obviously he's not an elite heavyweight by any standard. And Robert Helenius, he really honestly was never an elite fighter in his own right. I mean, he beat guys that were towards the end. He beat a Sam Peter that was already been knocked out. He beat a White Wolf who had already suffered defeats and had long periods of time outside the ring. So, I mean, you know, it's all about when you get a fighter and at what point in their career. And, you know, Dereck Chisora can look good against certain fighters depending at what point they're in. But when you put him up there with anyone that has a lot left in their career, I think it shows that he's just not at that level.
Interesting assessment. How about this? Dereck Chisora is better against taller fighters than he is shorter fighters.
You know, that's actually a pretty good assessment that you have there. Against taller fighters, I think the fact that he is a shorter heavyweight, it actually bothers them more than, you know, it's actually him having an advantage. I think it's actually the taller fighters having trouble dealing with his small, stocky style, the way that he, you know, weaves in. It's just that kind of style, you know, gives those type of fighters certain issues. Because odds are not the heavyweights out there, they're actually bigger heavyweights. They're they're fighting guys that are of higher weight. So when you fight someone like Dereck Chisora, who's shorter and stockier, you know, it's one of those things I think it throws them off more than him throwing them off.
One thing I didn't consider when he fought David Haye is that David Haye is the same height, 6'2", 6'3", and he was able to hit Dereck so easily on the chin, punch after punch after punch. You know, Dereck's style was always adjusted to a guy to bobbing and weaving. Now again, someone like David Haye, he was open to big shots all night long because of the style.
Yeah, no, I mean, styles make fights, they always say, and David Haye, as much as I've criticized David Haye in the past, I do respect the skill set that he has. He has excellent speed, he does have good power, he does have good movement. The one thing that I've always questioned about him is his desire in, you know, and how much of a warrior that he truly is. In certain fights, he just doesn't show it. Against Dereck Chisora, he knew that he was of a far higher level of boxer, and he went out there without any fear, knowing what he could do. He knew what Dereck Chisora could do. He knew the advantages were in his favor, and he took that fight and did what he should do.
Excellent stuff. Okay, let's go. Let's come back to America. We've talked about some of the heavyweights in Britain. Let's go back to America. Let's talk about some of your fighters, and one in particular, Deontay Wilder.
Yep, Deontay Wilder. He's a guy that we've wanted to see step up for a very long time. I
Hmm.
mean, he's 27, 28 years old. He's undefeated in all his fights, all by knockout, but he's fought nobody. And the amount of nobodies that he fought, it's extraordinary that a guy could fight this long and fight so much bad talent. I mean, he's finally starting to do something and step it up a little bit, but I mean, I think it's actually held back his career. I mean, they could have stepped him up a little bit more, but the thing is, they look back early in his career, he got knocked down by a fighter that was like, 11 and 20 or something like
There we
that.
go. I mean, a lot of fight fans. I get a lot of stick from fight fans, but a lot of them just talk without actually knowing the facts. He fought Harold Schultz,
Scissors,
yes,
scissors,
and
yeah,
he
yeah.
dropped him in the second round and badly hurt him in the second round. Yes, Deontay came back and won the fight, but if you're getting knocked down by guys like that, you've got to wonder what happens when you fight a guy who really has the intentions to knock you out.
Yeah, and one thing that gets me about Deontay Wilder is actually his frame. He's 6'7", but he actually doesn't have that much weight on the frame. He's actually very skinny, so you wonder about his ability to take a shot at the elite level. So I mean, he's actually going to be fighting against Audley Harrison. I think that's a very interesting fight that they've made. Audley's one of those guys. If you jump on him early, it's over. But if they keep him in the fight, and if he stays in there of Deontay Wilder a little longer, it may get interesting. But still, I think it's more of a case of Deontay Wilder getting the right guy at the right time.
What about the fact that I've brought a lot of comparisons between Deontay Wilder and David Price in terms of knocking people out, fighting guys and knocking them out very early, but not really being tested. And now Deontay's got his first test against a veteran in Audley Harrison. Could we see a Tony Thompson result here?
You very well could. I mean, it all depends on. Actually, it depends on Audley Harrison a lot too. I mean, Audley Harrison, when he mentally gets into a fight and he's mentally there for it, I mean, he can, show his actual talents, show that he was once a gold medalist. I saw him in the recent prize fighter. He went in there with an excellent mentality that he wanted to prove people wrong, prove that he had something left, and he blew through it. This particular fight here, if he goes in there thinking, hey, this is my last chance. If I don't win this fight, it's over. Then we might see a great Audley Harrison. But if he goes in there like he did against David Haye, saying, well, if I lose, I can continue on, then he's not going to have a good result.
How can I forget Steve Cunningham, Tyson Fury?
I think this is an excellent fight for Tyson Fury. I think it's a good fight for him to showcase himself in the United States. Steve Cunningham is one of the bravest fighters that you will see out there. He shows his heart, his guts, and determination like no one else. When he gets knocked down, it looks like he's done. He's flopping around like Trevor Berbick, but he somehow gets to his feet. He sometimes it's amazing how he can actually gather himself and continue in these fights and make it reasonably competitive. So I think this is the perfect guy to stick in front of Tyson Fury, a guy that you can knock down, but he'll come right back at you, and he'll come back at you harder. Now, the one thing for Tyson that's a big advantage is the fact that Steve Cunningham's a really small heavyweight. I mean, he's going to weigh around 208 pounds. He has the height, but he just doesn't have the weight. And I think that's going to be the biggest factor in the match. I think Steve Cunningham will again get knocked down. I think that we will see him on the canvas maybe more than one time. But, unlike his other fights, I don't think he'll be able to overcome it in this particular match. I think when he gets knocked down and he gets knocked down again, that eventually the size and weight of Tyson Fury is just going to be too much, and he's not going to make it through the fight.
Interesting assessment. So you don't think that Nazim Richardson can come up with a master plan in this one?
Nazim Richardson is one of the trainers I respect the most. I think he's one of the most intelligent people in the sport. And, as much as you can put a great game plan together, it's up to your fighter to follow it. Nazim's put together great game plans for Steve Cunningham in the past against Juan Pablo Hernandez and other fighters. And it's just sometimes Steve does not follow things. When he gets hurt or when he gets hit, it seems like the game plan goes out the window. And it takes a little while for him to get back on the plan that he was supposed to follow in the first place. So I think as good of a game plan as Nazim Richardson can put together, it's really not going to matter, because when you have so many disadvantages in a particular fight, the best game plan in the world can't get you the win.
Interesting. Bryant Jennings, somebody that I have a lot of time for. talk to me about Brian Jennings. He fights, I think, a guy by the name of Franklin in his next fight.
Yeah. Brian Jennings, he's one of the guys that's really surprised me because, originally when he first showed up on the world scene, he was a replacement fight. They were supposed to have a big fight on NBC Sports in America, and that fight fell through. So they brought 2 Philadelphia guys in there, and they said, hey, we're going to match these 2 guys off, see who's like the best Philadelphia fighter. And Brian Jennings won that fight. And then his very next fight, he fights White Wolf. He surprises everyone, knocks White Wolf out, Sergey Lahovich.
Yes.
And after that, he's been getting a lot of wins. But in his last fight against Bowie,
Tapu.
Yeah, Tapu. He got hurt. He got hurt in that fight, and it kind of shows when you put Bryant Jennings in there with anyone that's getting closer to the elite level and guys that aren't towards the end. I think his lack of experience and the fact that he's not of the skill of a lot of these fighters is going to really show. I mean, to be honest, in America, we have very weak heavyweights. We don't have a very good heavyweight class. The best fighters that are out there that are heavyweights all come from, Eastern European and over in Britain. Just right now, we just don't have a great class of heavyweights. And Brian Jennings happens to be one of the better Americans we have, but on the world level, it's basically the same situation as Chisora. On a domestic level, he's good for the United States, but on the world level, I don't think he's that great.
But to his credit, he got hit by Bowie Tapu, he got down, he got straight back up and continued boxing.
Oh no, that's showing that he's a true fighter, that he's a true warrior in there, that he didn't quit. Certain fighters, they can't handle it. You saw that with Zeth Mitchell. He got knocked down, he couldn't come back from it. He could not get back into the fight. Certain fighters don't react well to adversity. Some react better than others. Brian Jennings, he showed that he could react better, but again, who was he facing when he got hurt?
Very good point. Very good point. So he can improve, and you think that maybe he might not get past, or he'll get to a certain level, but won't go beyond that. Let's wait and see.
Yeah, no, he's definitely a wait-and-see guy. I think he's a guy that will end up getting a title shot based on the fact that he's undefeated, based on the fact that he is an American. It's a fight that you can try to sell to American networks. But you look at him, he is a guy that is not a big heavyweight. And right now, we are dominated by big heavyweights. These guys are super heavyweights. They almost deserve their own division. They're all around 250 pounds. They're all over, 6'7". These are big men. And a smaller man, at this point, unless they have great power like a Mike Tyson or, something that can really make them different or make them special, they're just not going to be able to compete.
Evander Holyfield would have done well against these guys.
He would have done decent, but, you looked at his fight against Lennox Lewis. He was at a point in his career where he was the best heavyweight out there. People had seen him beat Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was... Mike Tyson was still a pretty domineering fighter at the time that he beat Mike. He beat a Michael Moore. He went into that fight, and it's just the size. He's always had trouble with bigger fighters. He had the problems against Riddick Bowe, and he had the problems against Lewis. So
the second fight, I thought he did much, much better than the second fight against. In fact, I would have shaded it for Holyfield for the second fight. Lewis won the first fight unanimously, no doubt. But the second fight, I thought Holyfield did a lot better.
He definitely did do a lot better. I still didn't think that he won, but he made it a lot closer fight because I think he learned a few things from the first fight. And also, too, the mentality of Lennox Lewis. When you go into a fight knowing that you got robbed the first time around, you don't have that same fire and desire that you did for the first fight because he was going into it against, Evander Holyfield, the Tyson conqueror, the guy that's won 2 different championship belts, that has avenged his loss to Michael Moore. He had that excellent mentality going into the fight. He was really amped up for it. And the second time around, he was like, I already beat this guy. I have to do the same thing again because I didn't get it the first time around. Mentality is everything. And I just didn't think he had the best mentality for the rematch that he did in the first fight.
Interesting. I'm going to talk about dodgy decisions and shady decisions. Malik Scott, another heavyweight who just finished beating, who got a draw against Glasgow. Many people thought he beat Glasgow. What is it about these decisions in boxing, and they really are hurting boxing, don't you think?
Yeah, that's the biggest problem that boxing has today. It's not steroids, it's not, corruption. Actually it is corruption in the sense that bad judging. It's unbelievable to watch some of these fights and some of the decisions that these judges come up with. I mean, the fans at home can score better than some of these guys. I remember watching a fight that was, it was an overseas fight, and it was ridiculous. One judge had it 120, 108 for one fighter, and another judge had it 120, 108 for the other fighter. How can you have a fight scored for every round? And it was a close fight. There were a lot of close rounds, but to have it unanimously, each judge, I mean, it's some of the most ridiculous stuff in boxing. And, it's one of those things, it's just almost impossible to stop it. Because no matter what can you do to change it? We've tried everything. You had Manny Pacquiao get robbed against Timothy Bradley, the biggest name, the biggest star, got a robbery, yet they can't find a way to correct it after that.
I have to jump in there about that. Now, that fight, I predicted that Timothy Bradley would win a controversial majority decision. And do you know how I knew he'd win the fight? As long as Manny didn't knock him out. Do you know how I knew they'd win the fight?
How?
Because Timothy Bradley gave it away. He had a big poster of Bradley versus Pacquiao 2. I knew at that point, that's the only fight I've seen, press conference I've seen, where there's been a rematch poster already made before the first fight's even been had. So I thought, you know what, this is too dodgy going on here. If this goes to points, it'll be a controversial decision, and Bradley will win it. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, it was a strange situation. I remember that he was holding up a giant ticket for the rematch, but I honestly, didn't take too much credence into that because I said, well, what the heck, there's no reason for it because you can't sell Timothy Bradley as a big name fighter, a big name opponent. And after that dodgy decision, it didn't help, make a rematch or anything like that. He went right to a Marquez fight. I think it was more of a case of Pacquiao, almost like karma. A lot of people believe he did not win that third fight with Marquez, and it just seemed it bit him in the butt with that fight with Pacquiao. With Bradley.
While we're at it, we've got to talk about Bradley's last fight. Him going against the game plan, trying to slug with a guy who was a bigger puncher than him and much stronger than him.
Yeah, I mean, Timothy Bradley went out there and he had the whole, he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. I mean, he had the Pacquiao fight. People were giving him death threats. He was depressed. He gained a lot of weight. He reportedly got up to actually, I think, 180-something pounds. He's a guy that's always been fit. Looks like he swallows rocks. And, going into that fight, he had a lot to prove. And he went in there saying, I want to knock out Ruslan Provodnikov. This guy's going to stand straight in front of me. He's going to be there all night long. I can do it. And he went out there. He fought that way. And he got hurt. He got clipped. He took shots. But the thing that caught me is that his ability to take shots was severely compromised in this fight. I kept watching it thinking, man, this doesn't look right. I mean, I've seen Timothy Bradley get hit. I've seen Pacquiao hit him. I've seen Kendall Holt hit him. Why is a guy that's a natural 140-pound fighter, hitting him and hurting him this bad? And it was the weight. I honestly believe it was the weight that affected him. Because I remember a fight with Chad Dawson and Andre Ward. Yeah, Ward's not the biggest puncher in the world, but it seemed like every punch hurt Chad Dawson. And not only did he knock him out, he made him quit. And I mean, it's just at the weight class, when you take something out of you, when you lose a certain amount of weight, you just don't react well to punches. And I think that's what happened with Timothy Bradley. He had to take off that weight. His camp was concentrated on it. And when it came down to the match, it showed, it affected him.
Let's hope that Bradley can get himself back into the sort of shape he needs to be for the fights down the line.
Yeah, and to be honest, though, that fight, helps his career.
Of course it does.
Thing that could have happened to him, because before that fight, you asked Marquez about a Bradley fight. We have no interest in it. He's not marketable. He doesn't fight the way that would be, interesting for fans. After that fight, you see them taking pictures together and them talking about that fight. It's going to probably be next for Bradley. It was a great, great thing to happen in his career. The big question is whether or not he's going to be the same after that fight.
That'd be very interesting. Very, very interesting. Well, you was talking to you earlier on about dodgy decisions and shadiness. What about you, in terms of what you've done, in terms of being on the radio station? Have you ever had any sort of shady promoters or, shady situations happen while you've been online on your radio station?
Yeah, there was one particular situation, and not many people know about this because I tried to, put it away as soon as I could. But I wanted Lucian Bute for the show. I'd had many guys on the show, but Lucian Bute was the guy that I wanted on. And when I finally got him, everything just seemed wrong about the interview. The first thing that happened is I'm on there with the vice president of Interbox Promotions, David Mishke, and I have him on there. I'm talking with him, and I don't hear anyone in the background. I hear just him talking. I ask a question, he translates it, and I don't hear the voice. I'm like, well, my listeners need to hear Lucian Bute. Even though he's not speaking English, they need to hear his voice. And he says, all right, well, give me 5 minutes. I'll get it so it's on three-way so you can hear him better. So they do that. You get him on three-way. And, first off, when it's on there, it seems like these answers are coming awfully quick. I'd ask him a question. He would translate the question, and immediately the answer would come. So he'd finish translating it, and then would come the answer. And I'm like, well, something's not right about this. But, I went with it. I put it on the show. The very next day, everyone's telling me, it's like, that's not Lucian Bute. That's just some random French guy. This to me. I couldn't believe it. I was like, come on. And then I go online, and this is something I never do. I never look at another guy's interviews before the first time I interview him. And I listen, and I'm like, that's not his voice. That's not Lucian Bute. I'm like, no way this guy did it. So I call the guy up, and he's like, well, no. Lucian Bute was in the car, but that was his friend that was speaking on it, but he was translating his words. I'm like, well, David, there's no possible physical time for him to be translating Lucian Bute and you translating it back. This stuff is happening instantaneously. That's what fans are saying. I caught him hook, line, and sinker in a lie. I mean, he was just covering for the fact that his fighter dodged out of an interview and was trying to sell not only a fake guy, a fake French-speaking guy instead of a Romanian boxer. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, and eventually I did get the real Lucian Bute. I stood on the guy, but I mean, I had to change the episode. There are two different versions of the 17th version of On the Ropes. There's one with the fake Lucian Bute, and then there's the copy that I removed that interview, and it's like it never happened.
Oh, Chino, you've not got it.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, that's the first thing I would have done after the interview. I would have gone and listened to it just for a good laugh.
I have that interview, and I actually have the original tapes of the promoter. I never released it out there because I didn't want to make a big deal of it. I was working on a sponsorship deal, so I didn't want any controversy around my show and any of the guests. But that is the only time in over 450 plus guest interviews that it wasn't the actual guest.
Jenna, you need to let that out. You need to put it out there. I mean, it would be funny. You'd be your Lucian Bute parody. As Lucian Bute is fighting Jean Pascal soon, so even better still.
Yeah, maybe I'll let it out there just for a few people out there that want a good laugh. I'll show all the recordings there and show the French-speaking Lucian Bute.
After fans listen to this, I'm sure they're going to be wanting to find out more about it.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, in terms of Bayloric interviews, have you heard any interviews?
Yeah, I have. I've actually heard a lot of your interviews. I think you do a great job with it. I love what you're doing out there because, I mean, you're giving people what they want. They're giving them a direct interview, rate of the fighter. You're putting out there, and you're giving them lots of material. That's what I like to do. You know, you're talking to these guys for a long time. You're asking them a lot of questions. You're getting variety from them. You're not just getting the same boring, typical questions that are out there. You're getting a lot of, interesting answers and asking them a variety of things. And I think it's great what you're doing.
People seem to like the Tyson Fury interviews a lot.
Oh, yeah, no, that's one of the first ones that I ever listened to that you did. And it's like, Tyson, he gives such a great interview. I mean, he's outspoken, and he just doesn't hold anything back. And as an interviewer, you got to love that, you know? He swears, he cusses, he calls people pussies, vaginas, whatever. It doesn't matter. He says what's on his mind, and you just got to love it.
How do you feel when you hear a man speak in such vulgar words? How does that affect you as a woman?
Oh, it doesn't bother me at all. Honestly, I love it. I hate when a fighter gets shy because they think they have a woman on the line that doesn't really, want to hear that kind of stuff. I love it. Talk bad. Say something bad about a fighter. Give me something that is unique out there that, don't hold back on me. I don't want nobody to hold back. I want everything that you got. If it's on your mind, say it the way that you believe it, you know. And because that's what we strive for when we do this here. We want the uncensored, real guy out there, not a censored version of himself.
Jenna, be careful. You're gonna, you know, attract a lot of nutters to your radio show if you haven't already.
It's okay. I'm a girl that loves boxing and you know, loves it to an unnatural you know, place because of how much effort and time I put into it. So, you know, hey, I'm crazy for boxing. I love it. It's a violent sport, and I love violence. What can I say?
I was gonna say, just before I end the interview, I've got two things to say. First of all, I hope that you listen to me tomorrow when I'm on ATG Radio, unless you're going to be there yourself.
I very well might. I love Frank's show. I love what he does, so I'll definitely be listening, and maybe I'll even pop in.
Sounds fantastic. And the second thing is, I don't know how much you know about the PS3 and the 360 in terms of Fight Night Champion.
You know, that's one of the things that, even though, you know, they can consider me like one of the boys, a girl who loves sports, I never really got into like video gaming that much. I own an Xbox. You know, I love playing, you know, games of like James Bond where you can hunt down and take a person out. I played some boxing games, but in terms of, you know, Fight Night Champion, those type of games, those boxing games, and being able to maintain a boxer's career and play it out on the PS3 and the Xbox 360, I honestly don't own one. If I did, I'd play it, but I haven't gotten into those games.
Okay, well, the reason why I'm going into this subject is that Micky Mayweather, or known as Year 10 More, is the #1 fighter in the world. He's got a record of 112-0, and he's using Adrian Broner.
Yeah.
Now, he's fighting on May the 17th, against Juan Manuel Marquez, who's got a knockout record of 83%.
Yeah.
So, and would you believe it's a pay-per-view event?
That's amazing to me, but I mean, hey, when you're that one special gamer out there that's doing something that nobody else is doing, that you've established a boxing career through this video game that is like unheard of, that you're that madly skilled, that you're not using codes or hacks or anything to get to this level. You know, hey, everyone tries to get to an elite level in whatever they do, whether it be radio, whether it be boxing, or whether it be even game playing. You can do it, go for it.
So, yep, it's going to be $3.50, and it's going to be on Ustream, I believe, on May the 17th.
Hey, you know, if it was a free stream, I probably would watch it. I'm not going to quite throw out my money out there, but again, hey, the guy's doing something impressive in his own field and his own thing, and you got to respect him for that.
Maybe we can sort something out for you, Jenna.
that wouldn't be bad. I can report on it and tell my honest opinions of his fighting ability.
Tell you what, Jenna, would you be interested in being a co-commentator for it?
Absolutely. Like I said, I don't know much about, you know, the video gaming aspect of it, but if I'm watching it and I can see punches flying, I can definitely give my views on it and you know, express what I'm seeing going on there as if it was a real fight.
Well, here's something. I've been invited to be the commentator for this particular event. Would you like to be co-commentator then?
Yeah, absolutely, Ingram. If I'm not going to get too much in your way and I can be able to be...
No. You can have the floor.
Then I'd certainly like to take a grab at it. It might prepare me for my future in boxing, because I do hope at some point to replace Max Kellerman. He's holding my job. He's got it temporarily, but that is my seat on HBO Boxing. I deserve his job. It's going to take a few years to get there.
Well, I wish you all the best with it, Jenna. Thank you so much for talking to Bayloric TV.
All right, Ingram, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, speaking with you now for almost an hour and a half. And hey, I've done it myself. First time I interviewed Larry Holmes, I was like, I ain't ever going to interview someone of this caliber again. I'm going to hold him hostage, take him as long as I can.
Absolutely. ATG got 3.5 hours.
Yeah, so I'm already jealous of Frank Staya. He's already beat me in this, but hey, you know, we're all competitive in our own way, but it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I look forward to hearing the interview.
Jenna, thank you so much for talking once again to Bayloric TV. You're doing a great job of what you're doing over there. Keep up the great work.
All right, you keep up doing the great work too, Ingram. All the best.
Thank you very much.